Okay, welcome back to a few rotten reviews. In this case, it might be more than just a few. We're going to take a look at Captain Marvel. I picked this film because it's got just as much controversy on Rotten Tomatoes as The Last Jedi. And again, we have a split, quite a split between the tomato meter on the critics' score and on the audience score. We have a tomato meter of 78% and an audience score of 53%. Now, these numbers have been a lot more lopsided in the past. This was before Rotten Tomatoes changed their system behind the scenes, the way that they collect reviews and which reviews they're going to keep and which they're not going to keep and which are going to be tallied up in the score. There was a lot of controversy over this, and certainly the reputation of Rotten Tomatoes has taken a hit over it. Now, Captain Marvel was a movie that I don't think anybody would argue Disney wanted to protect, and this went beyond the normal fare. Disney has been accused by people before of tampering with the reviews on Rotten Tomatoes and on other sites. Now, this may or may not be true. It was alleged that they used third parties to put five-star reviews on certain products. Now, I don't have enough information to say whether it's true or not. All I can do is present the information that, what the controversy entails. And we're going to take a look at what I'm calling a few rotten reviews. But, like The Last Jedi, I might get surprised. We may end up with quite a ratio. As in The Last Jedi, we had way more 1.5-star reviews than we had anything else. I'm not going to go all the way back through the reviews. When I start seeing duplicates, like I did during my Last Jedi video, I'm going to call it a wrap. And we're going to go through and we're going to see what we can see. Now, the most recent review where I'm going to start is a review from 8 hours ago. And, well, it starts off with half a star. She really sucks at acting. Now, I'm sure this refers to the star of Captain Marvel, Brie Larson. And, well, who else could it refer to, right? We have half a star under that. Poorly written and poorly acted. There's no character development. The plot is terrible. The movie relies too heavily on SLJ and the success of previous Marvel movies. Wonder Woman is a much better female-driven comic book movie. Now, SLJ, I guess they're referring to Samuel Jackson, and certainly he was the most well-known star of the movie. Yes, Brie Larson has an Academy Award, and she's been in other movies along with Samuel Jackson. But clearly, in the Marvel Universe, in the MCU, Samuel Jackson is the draw. Without Samuel Jackson, perhaps they wouldn't even have made the movie. That's my speculation. Half a star review up next. Generic and formulaic, utterly predictable in the most unpleasing way, and the only surprise here is how it ruins Nick Fury. Again, they're referring to Samuel Jackson's character. And when they say generic and formulaic, this isn't something new to Captain Marvel or recent Marvel movies. The entire MCU is formulaic. You can argue whether it's generic. Certainly after 22 or 23 movies, anything is going to become generic once you're used to it. The fact of it, though, is that many Marvel movies, many origin story movies in the MCU have been accused of being generic and formulaic. We can take a look at the first Thor movie, the first Captain America movie. Not everybody loved these, certainly. But again, you won't find many half-star reviews, and they weren't utterly predictable. Maybe some people thought they were boring. Okay, that's a given. But none of them ruined previously established Marvel material or MCU material. Certainly no one would have said that Thor, even Thor the Dark World, which is considered by most to be the worst MCU movie. These movies before, that nobody ever said that they ruined Nick Fury, for example. And we'll get to why people say that this movie ruined the character of Nick Fury. It goes to a particular scene explaining how Nick Fury got his eye patch. But let's move on for now. And next up, we have a 1-star review. Okay storyline, probably one of the 2 weakest movies in the MC universe alongside Thor, The Dark World. What really made this movie unwatchable was the way the main character was written and the actress's portrayal of said character. The character seemed to be intentionally written to be unlikable and arrogant, unlike any of the MCU heroes, and Larson's facial expression was bland and unchanging throughout the film. Okay, good review. And I say it's good because it's really representative of most of the critics of this movie and the criticism that came out immediately following this movie. In fact, some of the same criticism came out about Brie Larson before the first trailer, before certainly the second trailer had been shown to the public. And the reason why is because compared to other characters in the MCU, whether this was deliberate or whether this is bad acting is up to everybody's opinion. But Brie Larson's portrayal of Captain Marvel is very wooden, and it goes into unlikable territory. People have said, in a crude way, that she's really representative of what people call resting bitch face. Which is its own subject if you want to look that up separately. That's the largest part of the criticism is just her portrayal of the main character. Now, we don't know if that was her interpretation of it or if she was directed to play it this way by the director or others, who knows, by an acting coach. I don't know. I don't have enough information on that. I just know the way it comes across to everybody. The next review here is 1.5 stars. Definitely not Marvel's best, but if you're a big fan, you will still enjoy it. Good characters outside of Brie Larson carry the movie. And again, another vote that Brie Larson is the worst part of her own movie. Not a good look when it's titled Captain Marvel and the actress playing Captain Marvel is the worst part of it. That's pretty bad. 2 stars. Not bad for a movie, but for the people who grew up reading the comics, this is not Captain Marvel. This is a constant PMSing selfish chick. She doesn't show any of the values Captain Marvel had, like being an overly good Boy Scout. It's like she didn't do any research on the caricature. Again, criticism on the way Brie Larson plays the character. 1/2 star review up next. Main character with no skills of acting, same faces, same reactions, same stupidity, bad movie. The cat scene was the best part, please. I think they're referring to the scene where the cat scratched out Nick Fury's eye. And if that's what we're referring to, this is sarcasm, of course, that's the best scene. Again, this goes back to why they say Nick Fury's character was ruined. The main part is that, something that was considered a part of a dark, mysterious part of his character that made Nick Fury serious, that had somehow made him a changed man, made him into what we knew as Nick Fury. They portrayed that in the movie as not some struggle with a villain where he had lost his eye, but simply a cat had become annoyed with him and scratched it out. And I know how that sounds, but that's what happens in the movie. 1.5 stars on the next review. Predictable, surprisingly lame action choreography, and very, very ham-fisted ideas. The only good thing in it was Samuel L. Jackson. Captain Marvel seems like a very unpleasant person to be around. Okay. Again, about Brie Larson's portrayal in the movie. And, it goes a little bit, it bleeds over into Brie Larson as a person, as an actress. Because when you see Brie Larson in interviews, she comes across not necessarily wooden, but she does come across as somebody who's overly serious, sarcastic, and not sarcastic in a good way, like maybe a Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, but sarcastic as in I don't need to be bothered with all this, and why am I even talking to you? And that really, it doesn't come across very well in the film. 4 stars on this review. I thought it was pretty good. Okay, I'm sure I believe you. I really do. 1.5 stars. The story is weak. The acting is okay at best. There is no tension, and I didn't care about any of the characters. There were a couple cute, lacked energy. This is the worst Marvel film to date. Again, this movie for a lot of people is right up there with Thor: The Dark World. Previously, any MCU fan would have said Thor: The Dark World, hands down, was the worst of the franchise. This movie has taken its spot amongst most. It's right neck and neck for a lot of people, if not worse for Captain Marvel. Let's move on to the next page. We have a 2-star review. Inconsistencies make it hard to get into, and woke message makes it even more painful. Now, the woke message that is being referred to, I think, is represented pretty well by the scene in which Captain Marvel approaches the man with the motorcycle and ends up taking his motorcycle. It's pretty much a cut and dried case of she pulls up outside a bar or walks to the outside of a bar, and there's a man outside on a motorcycle that kind of flirts with her a little bit, even offers to give her directions, and her response was to take his motorcycle, or at least in the film, it cuts to her riding away with his jacket and his motorcycle. Now, in the extended scenes, it actually shows her shaking his hand, crushing his hand, and telling him that she needs his motorcycle, his boots, his jacket, kind of a play on the Terminator 2 scene, but it comes off pretty much like Brie Larson's character as the villain, so maybe that's why it was cut from the actual release. You can find it on the extra scenes on the Blu-ray. I've seen it on YouTube, so I know it's out there. Yeah, the woke message is that, Brie Larson's character is tough, and she's super feminine and super strong, and she's not going to take any nonsense from any man, and it just comes out in multiple parts of the movie. And I guess if you're not looking for it, if you're not one of these people looking to find woke messages, you're just going to find it kind of off-putting. If you are looking to find the SJW woke messaging in what you're looking at, then you're going to find it in this movie. The next review, 0.5 star. Trash movie, complete trash, beyond words. Next up, 0.5 star. Not worth watching movie at all. There wasn't any attachment to main character. Her cocky attitude was too much. Everything was going so smooth. It's like there wasn't any challenge at all. Utterly disappointment. And Captain Marvel, for sure, is the most hated character. How can you like a movie when you don't even like the main character itself? I hope they don't make part 2. Well, yeah, a lot of people hope there is no part 2. In fact, a lot of people hoped she wouldn't even show up in the big finale movie, the Avengers Endgame. She did, but her role, it looks like in the editing of Avengers Endgame, they reduced her role in response to some of this criticism. But it's hard to tell without somebody in on the production telling us this for a fact. But it just looks like, in the way the editing was done, that they responded to this criticism in that movie. 1.5 stars. It's a waste of time. Not recommended. 1/2 star. Crap. Weakest of all the MCU movies. 0.5 star. This movie is disappointing since Stan Lee's face appears in the company logo. I hope Stan deserves better than this. And they're referring to the opening credits of the movie, in which there was a small tribute to Stan Lee. And actually, one scene of the movie has Stan Lee, of course, riding in a subway car, and he's looking at a comic book, somebody else's comic book. But yeah, it's just bad timing that Stan Lee passed away, and then Captain Marvel came along and rubbed everybody the wrong way at the same time, and it just, I don't know, it was kind of like, for a lot of MCU fans, it was rubbing salt in the wound, so to speak. Half a star, very boring movie, terrible acting or lack of from Brie Larson. There's been enough superhero movies out, we expect more. Marvel usually does well, but they went all in on a terrible story and writing and decided to put an actress that couldn't act. You can miss this movie and it wouldn't affect anything in the MCU. And I concur with that part. You could miss this movie. You could watch every other Marvel movie. You could skip this one, and you really haven't lost anything. You could see Infinity War. You could see Endgame. And, there isn't enough there to ruin anything. I mean, you might wonder where the hell Captain Marvel came from when you're watching Endgame. But then again, people that did see Captain Marvel were sitting in the theater watching Endgame and wondering the same thing. Just where the hell did she come from? And why is everybody acting like they're not surprised she's there? That was one weird thing about Endgame. But that's the subject of another video. 3-star review, the first one. It was okay, but not great. Okay, that's somebody that's pretty easy on the MCU. 3 stars. Captain Marvel is fun. While being underwhelming, Samuel L. Jackson is great with Brie Larson, and Ben Mendelsohn is a good villain. Captain Marvel feels too overpowered and confusing at times. Well, yeah, that's the other criticism. Captain Marvel, it starts with flashbacks, and it starts with the actual audience member knowing more about Captain Marvel's origins than Captain Marvel did, thanks to a type of amnesia, which, maybe that was a bad choice, the way they did it, because it kind of took the tension and suspense out of it, having it reversed around like that. But the other criticism is that she feels overpowered. Well, yeah, because she never really had an arc in the story. Like a lot of other heroes, like, for example, in Captain America, he doesn't start out as Captain America. He starts out as, somebody less than a normal soldier, somebody that's quite incapable, has a good heart, but is incapable of the feats of a normal soldier, much less of Captain America. And then during the course of the movie, he changes, he transforms into the character, and he has an arc. He's not the same person at the end of the story that he is at the beginning. In the case of Captain Marvel, she starts out the same as she finishes. She starts out with all her powers. She ends with all her powers. The only thing that changed was towards the last act of the movie, she just suddenly decided to start using her powers. I mean, that's all it came down to. Nobody was really stopping her. She just said, you know what? Hey, I'm going to start using my powers. That's what it boils down to. She had no character arc. So let's go on to the next page. 5 stars. Wow, the first one. I like it very much. I love Brie Larson as Captain Marvel, a.k.a. Carol Danvers. Okay, could be an employee of Marvel, could be third-party, part of the marketing budget put on here to boost the score, and that's certainly been an allegation out there. Many people have covered that. I can't say, even in my opinion, whether I think it's true. If I start seeing a lot of the same 5-star reviews with one sentence, or in some cases, on some movies, you'll see 5-star reviews, multitudes of them, that repeat the same sentence or have utterly no wording at all, they're just blank, then I would lean towards, yeah, it's marketing, it's fake. But so far, it could just be someone that's trying to boost the movie. Maybe they work for Marvel, who knows. Half a star, very bland and boring, no plot buildup, characters were weak, too linear, 1 out of 10, will not see again. It was very bland and boring compared to most of other Marvel movies. It did kind of feel more like a TV episode or a made-for-TV show in that the scope was really narrow. You didn't have a lot of grand, epic scenery, staging. You didn't have, there were some sets, like, for example, at the beginning of the movie, Carol Danvers was carrying out missions for an alien race. Now, these were sets that were supposed to be on alien worlds, but really all they did to create these alien worlds was on a small soundstage area, and they used CGI backdrops. So it still had this very confined, limited scope to it that you would see from a TV production. And again, when you saw like her fight on the subway train or on the train in Los Angeles, it just felt very small scale. I mean, they had even a car chase, like the type of car chase you would have saw in a 90s action movie, which I think could have been a stylistic choice because this was set in the 90s. But it had like almost like a T.J. Hooker type car chase vibe to it, you know, something that would be on TV before the A-Team. And of course, it could have passed for something in the A-Team because you didn't see blood. It felt a little bit too, you know, people getting punched, but you don't really see any damage to them. People just kind of fly out of the reach of the camera before you can see that they got hurt. That kind of reminds me of the A-Team or an 80s action movie, and it had that vibe to it. You have a 1.5 star review next. So a woman behaves like a stereotypical man, and she believes that this somehow empowers women. Also, awful acting and poor writing. Again, they're kind of mixing Captain Marvel, the character, with Brie Larson, the actress, and that was a really a big negative of the movie. Things that Brie Larson said before the movie was released kind of bled over into the mood before people even saw the movie. And so you actually have people confusing her for the character and vice versa. And some of that's her wooden acting, where, you know, kind of snotty Brie Larson in an interview kind of matches, well, in fact, it perfectly matches snotty Captain Marvel or Carol Danvers. I mean, it's very hard to tell the two apart. So, this is either bad acting or it's just that they're both the same kind of snotty character. Either way, it leads to people confusing the two as being one person. And in fact, you know, even in my mind, I kind of confused the character and the actress. Now, I know Brie Larson has appeared in other things that I've seen. The thing is, for example, I saw her in what is it, Skull Island movie, again with Samuel Jackson as a co-star. Now, I remembered everybody in the movie. You know, everybody in the movie, I can picture them. But I actually forgot Brie Larson was in the movie until somebody mentioned that to me much later. In fact, after Captain Marvel had been released. You know, somebody said, hey, you know, I remember her she worked with Samuel Jackson in Skull Island. And at first I was like, what, really? And then I had to think about it. And then I went back and actually looked on IMDb, and sure enough, there she is. And then I remembered her. But see, that tells me her acting, it isn't memorable. I mean, I never heard of Brie Larson until Captain Marvel. And I know she got an Academy Award for being in the movie The Room. Now, I've heard people say the movie was good, and I've heard a lot more say it was garbage. I haven't seen it, but I didn't even know who Brie Larson was. I hadn't heard her name before, so how good could she have been? There aren't too many actors or actresses that have won Academy Awards that I haven't at least heard their name mentioned somewhere. So it's very odd for an MCU movie. We have one 2-star review. Lacking the likable substance that nearly every other MCU hero has, Captain Marvel falls flat in attempting to deliver an entertaining experience, instead feeling like a shell of what it could be. Okay, I can agree with that. It kind of brings me back to how it feels like a made-for-TV movie. 1.5 stars. It was boring and repetitive. The main character doesn't have any character building. She just is awesome and has been and always will be. There is no growth, no aspirations. It just feels like she herself is reacting to a comic book, only mildly smiling at times. I hope she gets better character development in future movies. Well, a lot of people are hoping that she isn't in any future MCU movies, so we'll see. 0.5 star, lackluster and boring. Everything a superhero movie shouldn't be. I agree with that. 0.5 star, bad acting. Captain, same jaded face. Okay. 2.5 stars. The movie is visually good and has good CGI, but you never really connect with Captain Marvel. Making a cat more interesting, yes, I know how that sounds. Well, in a way, yeah, the cat was more interesting because the cat really wasn't a cat. It was a creature of sorts that was in the form of a cat. And actually, the cat was more interesting because the cat showed you something new, like you didn't know what to expect from the cat. Whereas from the character that Brie Larson was playing, her version of Carol Danvers, not only did you know everything about her more than she knew from the beginning of the movie, but she didn't do anything unexpected. She just maintained her same flat performance throughout. So, yeah, I could see the cat being more interesting. In fact, the cat had more tension to it just because you didn't know what was going to happen. 1.5 stars, regular, no pasa nada. Okay. 1.5 star, I never disliked a single character of the MCU, and then Captain Marvel came along. And you hear that from a lot of people. They just don't like her character. 1.5 stars, boring movie, really overhyped with uncharismatic performances and very dull characters with no personality. I would have to largely agree. It's not just Brie Larson. The other actors did their jobs. However, they weren't written to be that exciting. They weren't written in unique ways. I mean, it was unique that we saw Nick Fury's character before he was the Nick Fury that we knew. It was a little jarring, too, with the de-aging and that he was a complete doofus and more of a comedy buddy cop comedy type of character than the Nick Fury that we knew. And nothing in the movie explained how he became the Nick Fury we knew, because the movie ended with him still being that goofy buddy cop type character. So that could be considered boring, but it wasn't like Samuel Jackson had performed badly. His performance was still fine. It's just they had him doing something that was not exciting. Again, Ben Mendelsohn, he's a great actor. I've seen him in other movies, in Rogue One, for example, and I had no problem with him. But his character in Captain Marvel was written as the most generic, bland type of villain that you can imagine. And then the other off-putting thing is that he started the movie as a villain, and he was portrayed as the villain of the movie. And then about halfway through, all of a sudden, he's not the villain anymore. He's friends with Captain Marvel, and it just turns on a dime like that. And he goes from becoming a villain to becoming like Goofy. I mean, how can you have a villain and then all of a sudden the villain has like a big gulp in his hand and is acting like your friend? I mean, it was just very weird and off-putting. And it kind of like, the movie couldn't decide who the bad guys were. It's not like a movie where there's a plot twist and your good guys turn out to be bad guys. They tried that with another character in the movie, and it didn't work very well. Like, they tried the plot twist where the good guy turns out to be the bad guy. In fact, they tried the plot twist in a way in which Captain Marvel's teamed up with a team of people that are presented as the good guys at the beginning of the movie, and then later they'd turn out to be the bad guys, and she didn't know she was working with the bad guys. Well, it's done in such a cliched and obvious way that there's no tension, there's no twist in the plot twist. I mean, you can see this coming from a million miles away, and it's also very off-putting. The movie cannot decide who the villain is supposed to be, and when it does try to tell you, it falls flat because you saw it coming. Like, so it just doesn't work. Nothing about this works. On an emotional level, the only thing that works is that Brie Larson's performance seems to rub everybody the wrong way. Now, I guess that could have been done effectively, like in a Robert Downey Jr. sort of way, where you kind of dislike him for being this douchebag, but it didn't even come across like that. It just came across as, well, non-enjoyable, and nothing seemed to work. Half a star. Worst movie Marvel has made yet. Makes me reconsider watching Marvel movies in the future. Well, it made a lot of people wary about Avengers Endgame. You know, people had come off the high of Avengers Infinity War, which is probably the most perfect Marvel movie out there. And Then they hit right afterwards. They hit Captain Marvel, and they're thinking, well, oh my God, what's going to happen with Avengers Endgame? What's her role going to be in Endgame? Is she going to ruin Endgame? And that was the scary part for people. A lot of people said they were afraid to go see Avengers Endgame because they didn't want it ruined by Captain Marvel, and I'll bet a lot of people didn't go see it for that reason. So I wasn't one of them, of course. I needed to see Avengers Endgame, so I wasn't going to let Captain Marvel spoil me out of it. And of course, plenty of people on YouTube with their plot leaks and whatnot reassured most people that Captain Marvel wasn't going to ruin anything. But still, it was kind of touch and go there. 4 stars. Wow, 4 stars. Not the best Marvel film in the MCU, but still a good film. I disagree. I agree it's not the best Marvel film, but I'd say it's the worst Marvel film. And then, but still a good film, aside from being in the MCU, I would say just as a film on its own, it's pretty bad. It would be boring. The theaters would have been emptier than they were already. This thing would have been a total bomb, a complete disaster if it hadn't had the Avengers name attached to it. Here's a 3.5-star review. I don't think this movie deserves some of the derision it's come to be associated with. I thought it was fun and lighthearted the way the Ant-Man movies are. Brie Larson and Samuel L. Jackson had surprising chemistry, and I think the only mistake was making her too overpowered. This is evident when they had to bench her for most of Avengers Endgame, because she could have solved most of the Avengers' problems with the powers she has. I do hope they make a sequel because I actually liked this character. And wow, I completely disagree with that. I mean, I agree that she was overpowered and it threatened to ruin Endgame, but I completely disagree that this was fun and lighthearted like the Ant-Man movies. No character in the Ant-Man movies rubbed people the wrong way. Yes, they were fun and lighthearted, but they were, you could say, in fact, that Ant-Man and the Wasp had no serious villain, that it was more like a kid's plot. Okay, but nothing in there, no character rubbed people the wrong way and made them angry. So I completely disagree. 2 stars. Hard to get into a movie for a superhero that seems invincible. Needs to have a weakness. Acting was serviceable, but storyline was slow and predictable. Wonder Woman was a lot better. Well, I agree Wonder Woman was a lot better. It wasn't perfect, of course, but it had none of the political problems associated with Brie Larson. And it didn't have a backdrop of somehow the female character is not only better than men, but doesn't need men at all, and men have only wronged her and offended her. That was the vibe that Captain Marvel had. And as far as a superhero that seems invincible, exactly, that's what I meant by she has no character arc. She started out invincible, she ended invincible, she always was. It's just that she decided for whatever reason not to use her powers for most of the movie. Otherwise, she started out invincible. Here's a, wow, okay, another 4.5 stars. So good. Can't believe the audience score. The main character is cool and likable, the action is awesome, and the story had an awesome twist that I loved. Worth a watch or two, and I can't wait for the sequel. Okay, that's complete nonsense. I'm just going to straight up tell you that is not a real review. That is some kind of marketing. The wording on that, I just refuse to believe that's a real review. That's more like some marketing budget went into posting that, whether it's a third party or somebody directly employed by Disney or Marvel. That's not a real review. And that kind of review there, even though it's not 5 stars, they decided to make it 4.5. That's the kind of wording, concise, and word choice that definitely sticks out as contrived. It isn't real. It would be called, I guess you would call it a shill. 1/2 star. Boring and lacked an interesting story. Pretty sure any fan fiction about Captain Marvel is more worthwhile. Yeah, I would say so. In fact, in recent weeks, October 2019, there's actually an adult movie based on Captain Marvel that has been talked about by many people on YouTube, and it's been written about. And I didn't look into it, but a lot of people say that, yeah, even though it's an adult film parody, it's more interesting to them than the real Captain Marvel. So there's that. 2 stars. It was a good Nick Fury origin story. That's really it. I disagree. It wasn't even a good Nick Fury origin story because the Nick Fury we saw wasn't the Nick Fury that we knew. And the problem with that is that it never explained how he went from one point to the other. And I mean, it didn't have to do that in one movie, considering he wasn't the main point of the movie. But they could have moved it along enough. They could have made something about it more than just his eye was scratched by a cat or a creature in the form of a cat. No, it failed. If it was in any way intended to be a Nick Fury origin story, it completely failed. 2 stars. Lacking any real plot or direction, one of the worst so far in the Marvel releases. Half a star. Same old predictable slow story, just watch Iron Man 1. I agree, I could watch Iron Man 1 maybe 10 times in a row before I would ever watch Captain Marvel a second time. And I didn't pay money to see Captain Marvel. I saw it for free, and that's the best way to see it if you have time to kill and nothing else to do, because almost anything else, even just like firing up Minecraft for another boring session of that, would be way more exciting than watching Captain Marvel. I mean, why piss yourself off, right? If you're an MCU fan, you're just going to get mad. So it's probably better to, yeah, watch Iron Man 1 for the 12th time. 1/2 star. I'll describe this movie in 4 words. Pathetic waste of time. I agree. I think it was a pathetic waste of time, not only for the audience, but I think it was a pathetic waste of time for the company to make this movie, because even though they say it made a profit, counting the international box office receipts, I think somebody needs to look more into what the $700 million marketing budget really entailed. For example, buying up blocks of seats in the theaters that nobody sat in. I think this was, business-wise, also quite a waste of time. 1/2 star. Liberals need to stop letting their beliefs get in the way of their artistic values. This is not how films should be made. Okay, if that's what happened, then I agree. Is it that this was supposed to be some kind of left-wing political message? I don't know if that was the goal. There have been allegations that maybe somebody in Marvel was having a Me Too experience, and this was a way to mitigate that by putting out some kind of Brie Larson vehicle. And what I mean by Brie Larson vehicle is, I mean, Brie Larson is known for her politics. And so why did they pick her for this movie and shoehorn it in before Endgame? Well, the theory is out there that this was some kind of makeup for something that was going on behind the scenes. It's possible. Again, it's kind of conspiratorial. 1.5 stars. Fans' consensus, an okay story with action, passable humor, and visuals that most MCU fans are probably familiar with. Captain Marvel introduces its first hero that shows what the series is going to be like in Phase 5, and it's not good at all. Well, see, I'm not sure there's going to be a Phase 5. Like, yes, I know that's the plan, but I'm not sure that we're not already past the peak of MCU superhero movies, and perhaps these superhero movies in general. I think we may be over the peak. I think in Avengers Infinity War, in my opinion, was the pinnacle of the MCU and probably the pinnacle of superhero movies. Yes, you will have, in my opinion, you will have superhero movies of different types that will bring in big money. But as far as like being guaranteed winners, guaranteeing, like a guaranteed theme park attraction that's going to get butts and seats, I think we're on the downslope of this phase. So don't expect Phase 5 and Phase 6 and all this stuff. It almost kind of, it reminds me of, when the stock market's on an upswing for a lot of years, and the predictions about where it's going to peak get more and more wild and outlandish. You have people saying, oh, the Dow will go to 100,000 or some nonsense like this. And usually that's a sign that the peak's already come and gone and the crash is coming. And so don't put a lot of stock into all these future plans with Captain Marvel and the rest of the MCU. Here's a 5-star review. Funny, powerful, and amazing. By far one of the best movies on Marvel's franchise. Again, it's not worded in a way that strikes me as being a shill post, but it's completely out of the realm of reality. So let's move on. 1.5 stars. What a bad movie. Felt like watching a bad made-for-Lifetime channel superhero movie with mediocre CGI. Brie Larson completely miscast. Katie Sackhoff or Catherine Winnick would have been 1,000 times better. What the fuck is with Skrulls being the universe's dreamers? Ben Mendelsohn, great as usual, but we have another overpowered Disney Mary Sue, blah. Okay, there's a lot of things in that comment to deconstruct. The Lifetime movie channel superhero, yeah, like I said, it comes across as a TV movie of some sort. Brie Larson completely miscast. I agree. I wouldn't necessarily cast the two actresses they're referring to. They're a little bit too old, but I think they could have done much better. And they could have avoided the politics, to say the least. So that's why I think maybe that was a deliberate choice. They wanted the politics to go along with marketing the movie. Okay, what the fuck is with the Skrulls being the universe's dreamers? Okay, that goes back to a comic book fan that would know that the Skrulls were not the good guys. They were the bad guys. And in the movie, it kind of starts with them being the bad guys, but then reveals they're actually just almost like illegal immigrants. They're just trying to find a home, and they're victims on the run from other baddies out there. And it kind of makes them dreamers as a reference to when President Obama allowed children of illegal aliens that were brought into the country as minors to stay and go to college and etc. And it's a reference to that because, yeah, the movie tries to make the traditional comic book bad guys that, comic book fans knew into some kind of victim immigrant class of people that are just, trying to find a new home. So yeah, again, if you weren't a comic book fan, that wouldn't strike you as being that bad, but it does have a political edge to it nowadays too. Ben Mendelsohn was great as usual. I haven't heard anybody complain about him. But we have yet another overpowered Disney Mary Sue. Again, they're referring to Rey from The Last Jedi, and that's another reason I talked about The Last Jedi Rotten Tomato reviews first. Because when they say Mary Sue, they're not even using it in the strict literary sense. They're just saying she had no character arc. She was already perfect from the beginning. She was already superpowered from the beginning. So she just continued that way. Now, it's not the strict literary Mary Sue device, because the strict definition is that not only are they perfect, but they know everything. They're super smart. They have the solution for everything. They always save the day. Now, that's not quite what we have here or with Rey in Star Wars, but just the fact that they're perfect enough where they don't need to change and they don't need to struggle to overcome anything. That's what they mean by Mary Sue. We're almost starting to change the definition of that from, the literary sense to, the cinema sense. Worst MCU movie, in my opinion, that's a 0.5 star. Another 0.5 star. I was the unfortunate one who downloaded this horrible creation free of cost, but wasted my precious bandwidth. Shame on me. Again, a lot of people saw it for free because they were warned about, what they would be seeing, and so they decided to partake in the high seas, so to speak. And they were still kind of upset, especially people with a limited amount of data on their mobile plan, for example. Yeah, they spent a few gigabytes and didn't get their gigabytes worth. Oh, 3.5 stars. Solid job by Brie Larson. Enjoyable superhero origin film. Really liked Samuel L. Jackson de-aged. He was fun to watch acting as a younger version of himself. Priceless stuff. It was nice chemistry between the two of them throughout. strongest part of the film. And her backstory I enjoyed as well with her Air Force buddy. I adored her interaction at the beginning of the third act with her friend's daughter and her picking her colors. I had some visual effect minor quibbles and at times uneven storytelling. Okay, enjoyable superhero origin film. Well, if none of the previous MCU origin films had been out first, maybe it could have been passable, maybe. But see, our expectations are higher. You know, the MCU already had their boring Thor origin movie, in my opinion. And so, you know, we've thought they've moved past this. We've seen so much from them. And then to give us another origin story that's boring, you know, in one regard and easily predictable, yeah, that's you have to step it up, you know, like aside from all the other nitpicks, you're going to have to step it up. Half a star. Firstly, didn't like Brie Larson's acting. Secondly, the whole movie is trash. Okay, I can't disagree with any of that. 1 star, absolutely dull and terrible. 1.5 stars, that's all earned by Samuel. 1/2 star, a really bland and boring movie and is a huge disgrace to the MCU. A Russian comment, but it has 1/2 star. A 2.5 star comment. It killed time. It definitely was a treat for longtime MCU fans such as myself to see young Nick Fury played perfectly once again by Samuel. But the lackluster plot and sloppy writing bogs this show down so bad that it was no substance. And to top it all off, Captain Marvel has no character. She's just basic superhero number 1. Why do you think Man of Steel felt so boring? It was just the same story again, and Captain Marvel made a lot of the same mistakes. So my overall opinion of this movie is it adds nothing to the MCU. I agree completely. I especially like the comparison to Man of Steel because I saw Man of Steel in the theater, and while the visual effects were spectacular and the action was almost, it was too much action in my opinion, the story felt boring because it didn't show us a portrayal of Superman that gave us anything new. It was very dull. You know, it had me even in the heat of action in the final act of the movie kind of wanting to check the time. So I get the comparison there, that she's just basic superhero number 1. They really didn't tell you anything about her. I mean, yes, you saw that she was an Air Force pilot and you saw that she lost her memory, but who she was exactly, what personality she had, you just didn't get anything from it. I mean, it was almost like she's a cardboard cutout. You didn't get anything of substance. It's like you dressed her up in an outfit and you knew more about the outfit than you did the person wearing it. And that's just not good. 1/2 star. God, it was so boring. And Brie Larson was the worst at acting. Literally the only Marvel movie I don't like. When I buy the 23 movie box set, I'll just toss this one in the trash and watch all the other ones. Well, I wouldn't toss it in the trash because it does have cover art and whatnot, and who knows, maybe someday far in the future, it'll be worth something, hopefully before you die of old age. 1/2 star. I couldn't even finish this. Flat acting and a banal plot with special effects that didn't help. If this is the direction of the MCU is going, I fear the worst for the next phase. Okay, again, let's take the date we're on is October 11th, 2019. This is a recent review, so people are still looking forward to the MCU continuing, even though I have the distinct feeling that it's over and that the MCU we know is over and it ended with Endgame. But yet, people are still expecting it to carry on, and you can see that in this comment. But I have the feeling they're going to be sorely disappointed. 2-star review. Superhero movies are meant to leave you inspired. Can't say that I felt that way here. Tonally, everything felt off. Don't think the casting paid off, perhaps. Oh, it was more than perhaps. They could have cast anybody else for any role other than Brie Larson, and it would have been superior. Samuel Jackson was perfectly cast. That's who he is. Everybody else, yeah, they could have all been replaced with other actors. See, nothing was unique about any of their roles, where you couldn't just swap out Ben Mendelsohn for somebody else. You could have swapped out Annette Bening for any other actress, younger or older. Nothing was unique enough about those performances, and not due to the fault of the actors, but due to what they were given to work with, that they were just generic. Everybody could have been swapped out except for Samuel Jackson, and it would have been better, or at the worst case, just the same. Half a star. A movie that takes you to nothing without an interesting climax. Bad villain. Bad attempt at feminism, especially the scene where he says, "I must not prove anything to anyone. Simply a burden tape is the same or worse than Iron Man 3. Yeah, Iron Man 3 was forgettable. I mean, it obviously had a higher budget than Captain Marvel, and it had better actors all the way around. But yeah, Iron Man 3 was forgettable. Is Captain Marvel worse? I would say yes, because Iron Man 3 is forgettable to me, but Captain Marvel, I've only seen it once, and I can remember how bad it is, so yeah, it must be worse. 2 stars. What let this down for me was having a protagonist that's hard to empathize with, thanks to a deficit of personality. Captain Marvel is somewhat misanthropic like early Iron Man, but where he was entertainingly cynical and witty, Captain Marvel just comes across as entitled and self-absorbed, eventually always able to get her own way thanks to having infinite superpowers. And again, I touched on this a little earlier, it could have been played up so that her character was kind of unlikable to other characters, but still likable to the audience. But again, no, she was unlikable to not only her fictional characters in her world, but also to the audience, and that's a complete disaster. 1/2 star. Superhero genre isn't about sexism. The rule is simple: go woke, or go woke, get broke. Yeah, but I'd have to make a correction. It's more like get woke, go broke. So they've kind of like reversed it around. That's my nitpick on that criticism. 1 star. Probably the weakest movie that has come out of the MCU thus far. Action and effects were good. Story was all right. Main character was poorly written with zero growth, emotion, or story. And the acting only built up on the negative aspects of above rather than elevating it. This movie is bad as a standalone and absolutely should not exist as part of the MCU, as it's a massive net detriment to everything it comes into contact with. If this movie had one success, it was to have the audience have more, and then it goes on. It is the weakest movie. It's the most offensive movie. The action and effects were good? No, I don't think so. Again, it's like a TV movie. Made for TV action and effects, okay. But for a Marvel movie, and when we're expecting to see more, no, it wasn't okay. 2.5 stars, a decent origin story with an uninteresting main character and a third act full of bad CGI. Captain Marvel fails to generate the same emotion as the last installments of the MCU, perhaps due to the fact that in its attempt to slowly introduce us to the characters, it ends up being a little bit boring. Okay, I disagree because I don't think it was a decent origin story. Like, okay, it's an origin story. You're supposed to find out the origin of the character, who this person is, but you never find out. I mean, you find out where she came from, and you find out that she's like super tough, but otherwise, you don't know anything about her by the end of the movie. And a 1/2 star review. Horrible acting, terrible writing, subpar action. All unusual because Brie L can do better. Last frustration is the explanation of how Nick Fury lost his eye. Why, though? Yeah, everybody all the audience members, all fans of the MCU, they were expecting quite a story about how Samuel Jackson lost his eye. They weren't expecting it in Captain Marvel, but they were expecting it perhaps in another Avengers movie, and they were expecting, because of things that were alluded to in the other movies by Samuel Jackson's character, they were expecting Nick Fury to be engaged in some kind of life or death struggle, some kind of epic thing going on something that would be memorable, that would be a turning point for him where he would lose his eye. You know, that he sacrificed his eye for some epic thing. And instead they got, well, just a shrug of the shoulders, careless. Well, the cat got kind of miffed at him and scratched his eye for no reason. You know, like a cat that you pet too much and it purrs and you keep petting it. And then it just like freaks out. It scratches you. Well, it scratched his eye. And then that was it. It was just shrugged off like no big deal. And then on top of that, Nick Fury played it off like it was no big deal throughout the rest of the movie. And even at the end of the movie with his eye gone and him selecting a glass eye to replace it, it was still no big deal. Like, I mean, it was like the movie didn't care. It was played off as a joke. And yeah, it's a joke, except it's not funny because it kind of makes a joke of the MCU. And it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. 1/2 star. It's the worst thing a movie can be. Boring. Agree. There's worse things about it than the fact that it's boring. But the worst thing any story can be is boring. That's the worst thing a book can be, a worst thing a movie can be, or a play. I mean, you can have people hate it and people like it, and you can even make money off controversy, but boring is the worst of the worst. It's the death of creativity. 1/2 star. This movie was just bad, lacked any emotions. Again, that's more Brie Larson lacked the emotion. Captain Marvel lacked any emotion. But the audience had emotion. Yeah, a lot of them were pissed off. So they had emotion. 1/2 star. Completely ruined the character of Nick Fury for me. Boring, flat character. Ham-fisted messages. Not for me. Yeah, it did come across to some people like that. Some people loved seeing Nick Fury as a different Nick Fury. Other people found it boring because he was reduced to kind of like a buddy cop sidekick of Captain Marvel. And there was no backstory on him to explain how he had been that way before. And it certainly never showed how he grew out of that. So yeah, I wouldn't call it boring. I would call it more jarring. You know, the de-aging was good, but Nick Fury's character to me just came off as jarring in a lot of ways. A 5-star review. Oh boy, 5 whole stars. I'm not the SJW type, but I liked Captain Marvel's movie. The negative ratings were not because of the movie itself, nor the characters. It was because of actress Brie Larson and her interviews. I just found out why when I asked my Brazilian friends about the movie. They liked it and didn't mention the lead actress. I don't like gossip, so I generally don't like to see the personal lives of actors. I only found out about Brie Larson's controversial interviews talking to Americans. People don't hate. I would say even as a Brazilian, you're giving it 5 stars, but what you're describing, aside from the fact that you're not an SJW, is just like nothing interesting about the movie. Like, you don't say anything about the movie being good or bad. You're just talking about, you don't believe it's got SJW stuff in it. So again, I doubt the sincerity of this. I think this is more of a damage control posting by whoever. I guess you can leave it up to your imagination as to who that would be. 1.5 star review. Watched it only for the cat. That was the only interesting and entertaining part. That's pretty bad because there's a lot of cat videos on YouTube. They're free to watch. You could watch a zillion of them, and they're better than the one in Captain Marvel. So yeah, okay. 0.5 star. Wanted to like this movie, but it was boring. The plot was weak, and the humor felt forced. I think the humor, it wasn't forced. It was just like bad. Like there were some parts where you can tell it was supposed to be funny. Captain Marvel would do a quip, like trying to do her version or Brie Larson's version of a Robert Downey Jr. quip, but it just didn't work. I guess she's just not the type of actress that can pull that off, and or at least her version of Carol Danvers can't pull it off. 1.5 stars. Movie felt forced, and Brie Larson is weak as Carol Danvers. 1/2 star. Too much political stuff. I just came for the action. Only action was near the end. 1/2 star, not what I expected, very boring movie for me, unfortunately. 1 star, did not finish watching it. 15 minutes were more than enough to make me quit this movie. Glad I didn't waste my money going to the cinema on this horrible attempt of movie. How does it have more score on the critics than in the audience? Again, yeah, it's got that controversy. That's why I chose this. That's why a lot of people chose to talk about this movie. How do you get, critic scores that are telling you how fantastic it is, and then everybody that sees it is giving it a rotten score? I mean, it's a total disconnect. You saw the same thing with The Last Jedi. You see it with some other films that I'm going to get into. Again, I say Access Media. And if you don't know what I mean, look up Access Media on YouTube. You'll find plenty of people talking about what that is. 1/2 star, Spanish, so we'll move on. 1/2 star. Does anybody remember the 90s? I guess we're just going to have to take James Gunn's word for it when he said Captain Marvel is the most powerful MCU hero, because that's not what I saw here or in Endgame. As a standalone movie, this is just fine. That's it. In the MCU, it feels like a piece of jigsaw puzzle that someone is trying to force into a place where it clearly does not fit. Okay, I agree 100%. To me, it seems like somebody made the choice at Disney or Marvel to shoehorn this in before Endgame, and that was the only place to shoehorn it in. Now, I've heard stories that this was planned to be released quite a while before that, but for some reason the timing wasn't right. They couldn't squeeze it in, or perhaps the theory goes they only put it in between Infinity War and Endgame because it's the only place where they could get the hype up high enough to convince people they needed to see it before they saw the conclusion of their 23 movie arc. But it's like somebody forced the Russo brothers to put this into Endgame, and it's like, it could be chalked up to one of those conspiracies, like maybe Kevin Feige was having a Me Too problem, who knows? And this was some kind of penance. This was some kind of way to smooth the trouble over. I don't know what the real story is. I just know that this feels like it was shoehorned in, and when you see Avengers Endgame, you also get the same impression that it's been edited and re-edited a few times, and that's why it feels a little bit disjointed how Captain Marvel shows up in Endgame and disappears for a lot of it. I think the story's not over on this yet, and we're going to find out a lot more in the future. But let's move on to this 3-star review. Somewhat mediocre plot and terrible acting. Great soundtrack, though. So a great soundtrack is worth 3 stars, but the great soundtrack was just playing some well-played, over-cliched 90s hits. And in a couple of cases, those hits didn't belong where they were because, for one thing, there was a scene in which Captain Marvel was inside her own mind with an AI intelligence, and a Nirvana song was playing in there. And the problem with that is, because of the time period that Captain Marvel took place in, she would have had no knowledge of Nirvana or heard any Nirvana songs. So it's clear that at the expense of realism with the plot, they went ahead and shoehorned this soundtrack in there of 90s movie cliched songs, just to give it a 90s vibe, because I guess they had seen how that had worked for Guardians of the Galaxy. You can use all these older songs from another time period and get a special vibe out of it, connect with people like that. But it didn't work for Captain Marvel. It just felt forced. It felt awkward. And for example, there was a late in the movie fight scene in which they played a song by No Doubt, I'm Just a Girl, and it didn't even match the actions of the fight. It came across totally clashing with what was going on during the fight, and it just played. It didn't play from a device inside the movie, on the set. It didn't have a reason for playing. It just played into the soundtrack like you would see in a comedy. In a straight-up comedy. So it just didn't work. It was a bad attempt at doing what Guardians did. Here we have 1/2 star was the worst Marvel movie. Below that, 1.5 stars. Samuel L. Jackson is awesome, but Brie Larson is just unlikable in this role. It's as though they told her to have the cockiness of Tony Stark, but with none of the charisma. And yeah, I agree. She tried to do like a Tony Stark type of impersonation, but it's totally wrong for her. 2 stars. Samuel L. Jackson was as good as always, but it's a forgettable entry into the MCU. No, if it were a forgettable entry, it would be like the first Thor movie. That's forgettable. No, this is like memorable in a bad way. That's worse. 1 star. It's hard to watch all the way to the end as I have a broom with more depth of character and a more natural presence. I see why this film was held up by the 2 Marvel films either side of its release. That would be Infinity War and Endgame, as I just mentioned. At least I know I can save my money on any sequels. Truly awful. 1/2 star. Neither this movie had any plot or character, except the only thing highlighted at, look at me, I am a woman. Good point. 2 stars. Not my favorite Marvel movie. I see what's going on here, and the fans don't like it. Disney needs to do better before DC eclipses them. Well, I don't think DC is going to eclipse the MCU, because the MCU is pretty much over as it is. So if the DC does become a big thing, the DC is nowhere near as popular as the MCU. I mean, let's not talk money. Let's talk about like discussions. Let's talk about word of mouth, water cooler talk. MCU is way more popular than the DC movies. It's way more coherent than any of the DC movies. So I don't think the DC will ever eclipse the MCU, because the MCU is like a one and done already. It's wrapped. If the DC ever becomes as powerful as the MCU culturally, the DC film universe will be out there on its own, because the MCU is over. I mean, in my opinion, you'll never see both of these side by side. Those days are over. 5 stars. Okay, Spanish. But I would probably disagree with it in any case. 1/2 star. Awful, just awful. I'm done with Marvel movies. 4 stars. What can you say for this movie is just another good MCU movie? No, and I disagree with what you're saying. 1 star. The movie was just meh. I like Brie Larson, so I'm willing to accept that she was directed to act a certain way, but the whole thing for me was forgettable. Yeah, I agreed with that once upon a time, maybe a year ago, until I saw Endgame. Now, if Brie Larson had been really wooden in her movie, and then in Endgame she was different, I would have agreed with that. But no, Endgame was filmed first, and Brie Larson's movie was filmed second. So she had different directors, and yet she acted the same in both movies. No, this was planned beyond just a director telling her how to do it in her one movie. Like, you see this in Endgame, too. And Endgame was filmed first. Stiff performance by Larson. Well, 1/2 star. Not a great performance as other female superheroes like Gadot. Another reference to Wonder Woman. 1/2 star. Another generic superhero movie with a bad script, score, CG. Don't recommend. I didn't think the CG was that bad. I think that it was just like, you know, coming off of Infinity War, it was going to disappoint because this movie didn't have the budget. So what CG there was passable, but it wasn't like over the top. It wasn't like an Avengers movie. And so it had some stiff competition to live up to. I wouldn't criticize the CG. I would criticize everything else first. For me, the CG was the least of the problem. 2.5 stars. Way too much feminism. 1/2 star. Waited to watch for only $3.99, and it wasn't even worth that. Brie Larson is a bad actress. No emotion or depth. The scroll costumes were so bad. Come on, Disney, with your budget. This was a garbage movie. Again, yeah, Disney has a budget, but if the theory is correct that this was shoehorned in, it was also shoehorned a budget, and yeah, it shows. I mean, It was just enough effort to pass, to make it passable, but nothing more, not a drop more. So there's no question. Disney, Marvel, they did not open up the money spigots on this one. That's why it felt like a TV movie. 4 stars. Adrenaline, possibility, excitement, and goosebumps. Captain Marvel kicks ass. No. I didn't see it. I didn't feel it. Half a star. Captain Marvel was a bland, boring protagonist. Half a star. It's the loosest movie I've seen without any emotion, pure effects, and a hollow story. 2 stars. Decent special effects. Half a star. Could have had better cast. Half a star. Another Marvel movie. How doesn't change the wheel. It's a messy movie with a boring main performance thanks to Brie Larson. She is written more like a villain, but for some reason the movie makes it clear every time she is strong and independent heroine. I agree with that. It is written like she's a villain. In fact, the outtakes on the Blu-ray kind of make it even more like she's a villain. I'm wondering if maybe the movie could have been successful playing her as a villain, actually making her the villain, and then somehow at the third act she decides to be one of the good guys. It might have come out a lot better that way, because she could have played a villain straight up on this one. Just a little more sneer, a little more cruelty, keep the outtakes in. Yeah, it would have been better. People would have liked it more. 3 stars. It was decent, but a bit disappointing compared to other MCU movies. Action sequences and scrolls were major highlights. I don't think the action sequences were highlights because, again, it felt like a 90s or a late 80s TV show. And the scrolls weren't highlights because you didn't hardly know anything about them, except that they turned out to be on the run from the real bad guys, and they were just immigrants that needed help. That wasn't really a highlight. That was just part of the bore, I thought. 1 star. Had to stop myself from falling asleep in this one. Really didn't enjoy it at all. Worst Marvel movie to date. 2 stars. I wouldn't call this a bad movie, but with the MCU reputation, this movie was disappointing. Compared to DC's Wonder Woman movie, which has its issues too, it wasn't the best that was offered. Captain Marvel as a character didn't face any real challenges to challenge her powers and her ability to think. By the way, the fight with Yon-Rogg was disappointing to see because Captain Marvel didn't show emotion, but he did, and he was all about controlling emotion, and her character arc was about showing emotion. Yeah, and that's the weird thing about this movie. The beginning of the movie makes a point to show you that her commander, Yon-Rogg, was trying to train her not to show emotion. And in fact, he disciplined her not to show emotion and to be more effective in combat by not showing emotion. But she never showed any emotion. She never showed any emotion. It was as though everybody else, all of the other actors in the movie, acted like she was showing emotion, but she didn't show any emotion. She didn't show it at the beginning, she didn't show it at the middle, and she didn't end up showing any. So it was really strange to have another major character chastising her for showing emotion, and yet she never showed any. I never saw evidence that she had emotions. 4 stars, okay. Well, is very good the prequel before Infinity War and the future Endgame, but their scene's a bit boring. The final battle is good, and the post-credit scene is fantastic, meaning that the real final battle is coming. I say good movie, but the scenes, they have to improve. So why did you give it 4 stars? Maybe you should give it 2 stars because you said it was a bit boring and it needs to improve. How is that 4 stars? I will comment on the Endgame reference, the post-credit scene. Well, like a lot of people, this review seems to be saying that that was the highlight of the movie. If the Endgame scene at the end was the highlight, wow, that's really bad because that scene wasn't even actually in Endgame, although it was painted as being in Endgame by the media and by the movie. So, yeah, 4 stars, come on now. Some of these reviewers, they're just clicking buttons. I don't think they know which buttons they're clicking, what these buttons do. Um, 3 stars. Standard Marvel fare, nothing special. Wow, then you must have a really low opinion of Marvel and the MCU because this is not standard for them in any regard. It's not standard for the MCU, and I would say it's not standard for any Marvel, not any Marvel prior to the last 4 or 5 years, that's for sure. 2.5 stars, they're all the same. Not sure what that means. 4 stars. As origin stories go, I liked it. I'm looking forward to see where they go from here. Um, well, you mean sequels to Captain Marvel? I think they go nowhere from here because no one has yet announced any sequel to Captain Marvel. So um, the 4 stars, well, you might have to hold on to that for a while. Um, half a star. M not allow ancestors cry. Well, yeah, your ancestors might cry if they watch this, especially more than once. 1.5 stars. Brie Larson ruined this movie. Her acting is so blah. She has the emotional depth of an overcooked French fry. Interesting. 2 stars. Unfortunately, it's the most boring and underwhelming Marvel movie. I really tried to like the humorless and boring character whom experiences zero growth throughout the movie. Exactly. She starts off the same as she ends. 1.5 stars. Sucked. Brie Larson was a good choice, but the movie lacked so much it would be a waste of time to go into further detail. End credits were great, though. Cool glimpse of Endgame. Is a cool glimpse of Endgame worth 1.5 stars? Maybe, but doesn't seem worth the $700 million marketing budget, does it? 2 stars. Meh at best. Utterly formulaic, which is nothing new to Marvel, but somehow manages to be dull, missable. If you are thinking you need to watch this in order to make sense of the later Marvel film, fear not. You get everything you need to know from the main series. Shame I wanted this movie to be great, but it just wasn't. Yeah, that's a lot of people's thoughts. They were just disappointed because they paid their money, they went to the theater, and then for the first time in the MCU, they were let down. Half a star. Boring story and boring performance by Brie Larson. Only good thing about this movie are a couple of special effects. Yeah, there were a couple of cool effects. The part where she flew through the enemy spaceship and blew it up, that was pretty cool. I guess. 3 stars. Disappointing for an MCU film, yet still has a lot of fun, but its main character has just very underdeveloped. B minus. So you're saying that 3 stars is a B minus? Okay, I guess so, but I don't know. I guess it could be. My math skills aren't that great, adding, subtracting fractions of stars. 3.5 stars. I thought it was a good movie. It was definitely not the best MCU movie, though I thought it was a good amount of action-packed. Some say this was a bad MCU movie, but I disagree. It does deserve some credit. Brie Larson definitely does. Well, she deserves credit for sticking to her guns. I mean, she comes across as like the kind of woman you meet at the grocery store that's not in a good mood, and she like pushes you out of the way with her shopping cart, and she continues to be like that, and she played Captain Marvel like that. So hey, yeah, she's consistent and she sticks to her guns despite the criticism. She sticks to her guns. You can give her that. That's effort. Half a star. I can't read it, but I'll take their word for it. Half a star. The story is good, but the casting decision is very poor. Yeah, I agree. Brie Larson being the worst. Half a star. Movie is the worst in the franchise. It's boring and has no life. It feels very forced. She is the Superman of the MCU with the best and most powerful abilities. No one likes a Superman. The point of all the heroes in the MCU is they were all flawed, but she isn't. She is the color gray, boring and plain. 5 stars. Good humor and good action as expected of Marvel. Some of the American imperialist overtones of saving the refugees were overdramatic and, considering what was happening during the release, not entirely accurate. So not only are you shilling for Marvel and giving it 5 stars, but you're saying that the overtones of the immigration debate that were put into it were overdone and not accurate. Well, which part wasn't supposed to be accurate? The alien parts or the superpower parts? Because none of this has to do with the immigration debate going on right now in the U.S. Like, this is really a mess here. Half a star. Terrible. One of the worst movies I have ever seen. 1 star. I have to place full blame on the directors and the writer on this one. A good MCU film should match the tone of other MCU films. It's like the filmmakers had never seen one before. Sam Jackson is great for what he got, which was unfortunately a neutered Nick Fury. Brie Larson is a great actress, but her role darted from heroic to unnecessarily mean. You can't fault someone if the ink and paper are lacking and the direction is poor. The story breaks a bunch of continuity, and this includes the 2 worst moments. Again, continuity, the eye scratch with Nick Fury. He did allude to it in other movies that it was something else. I mean, he didn't say what it was, but he didn't describe it as being a cat scratch or something that could be construed as that. Also, at the very end of the movie, continuity-wise, it either retcons previous Marvel lore, MCU lore, or it's a mistake in that Nick Fury is seen shown sitting at his desk, looking at a photo of Captain Danvers next to one of her fighter jets when she was in the Air Force, and on the side of her plane is written something to the effect of the Avenger, or her call sign on the side of the, stenciled on the plane, and then he suddenly gets the idea for the Avengers. But see, in the previous Marvel films, it was already shown in Captain America, for example, that he was the first Avenger. And, these are references in other Marvel films that would have taken place before the 90s. So that's a retcon in itself. That was kind of jarring at the end of the movie. And I don't know if, again, if that's a retcon or a mistake. Disney doesn't like to admit mistakes. It's against their company policy, apparently. So you have to say it's a retcon. That's the thing about, you get this in the Star Wars movies too. Disney takes control, and if they do make a mistake, rather than saying it's a mistake, they just simply retcon previous material and make it canon. There are videos about this, and Walt Disney Company and their inability to acknowledge any type of mistake. Not the great customer service, but not the great type of customer service you get in other types of businesses. I guess in Hollywood, admitting a mistake is admitting defeat or some nonsense. Who knows? Half a star. Poorly constructed heroine with lack of emotion and character. When the best character in a movie is a cat, then you have a problem. Half a star. Absolute feminist pandering garbage. Save your time. You can't get it back. 2 stars. While I don't think the movie was terrible, I was very disappointed. Bland directing, generic story, and a surprisingly very poor performance by Brie Larson. Was expecting more from Marvel. 4 out of 10. 1 star. Ugh. An annoying movie with hints of awesomeness. Hints of awesomeness? I didn't even find a hint of any awesomeness. Okay. 2 stars. This movie was exceedingly bland. It was just so plain and simple. Brie Larson is okay. The script is average. And the movie suffers from an awful, underdeveloped villain. The movie suffers from not really having a villain. Anytime you think you've found the villain, it's later shown that that's not the villain. There really isn't a villain. I don't know what to make of it. I mean, you had, there is an appearance by Ronan, the character that was first introduced in the MCU in Guardians of the Galaxy. Yes, he's a villain in Guardians of the Galaxy, but in Captain Marvel, he's just like a cardboard character that shows up. And the funny thing about the actor that plays Ronan, it's the very same actor playing him in Captain Marvel, but myself and many others, the first time we saw it, we thought it was a different actor that was hired to play Ronan because he looks so different and he sounds different, but it's the same actor. and that's verifiable. Just look at the credits on IMDb. So I don't know what to make of that. You know, even Ronan, a known character, didn't come across right in his appearance in Captain Marvel. Half a star. I didn't think that disappointment could be this bad. Go watch Wonder Woman and avoid this trash. Well, Wonder Woman wasn't in the theater at the same time. At least I think it was in the theater before Captain Marvel. Wonder Woman, yeah, it was far superior. It was not, certainly wasn't any less cliche or any less predictable or formulaic, but it was more entertaining, and the performance of all the actors was much better. 5 stars. Truly amazing girl power movie. My 8-year-old daughter and I loved it. New favorite superhero. Okay, make sure that when you go back to work at Disney, you tell them you wrote at least one of these reviews. You might get some kind of credit for it. Another 5 star. Does it work? The short answer is yes. There's enough to keep both die-hard Marvel fans and newcomers engaged. No. If it's supposed to work like that, no, it failed, because I saw it for free, and the only reason I continue to watch it is to see how bad it would get. 3 stars. An okay, middle-of-the-road MCU movie. See, I don't get that. So many people have said in the reviews that it was just blah, meh, or middle of the road. No. I would consider like Iron Man 2 middle of the road. This is like scraping the bottom of the barrel. This is way down there. I don't get where they're coming from with that. 3 stars. Good story. Great characters. Carol Danvers is pretty uninspiring, though, but that may not be Brie Larson's fault entirely. Well, I don't know, because Brie Larson, like I said, she had more than one director telling her how to do this in 2 different films, and she came across the same in both. So, I don't know. I don't know about that. 4 stars. This is my wife's favorite Marvel movie. We saw it several times in the theater together. I liked the set and sound design when the Star Force invaded the planet at the beginning of the movie, and again around the friend's house in the middle of the movie. The de-aging of Fury was great. My favorite characters were played by Ben Mendelsohn and Annette Bening. Those characters were completely generic characters. I mean, I like those. I like the actor and actress. I like many of their movies, but they hardly had an effect on the movie. Their characters didn't do anything. Like anybody could have played them. So I completely disagree. Half a star. This movie is so boring. 1 star. Boring by the numbers superhero movie with nonsensical plot and wooden acting. I agree. 2.5 stars. Standard MCU letdown. It's not standard for the MCU to let people down. They have let people down. Thor: The Dark World. I don't like Thor. A lot of people don't like the first Hulk. They've let people down, but it's not standard by any means, or we wouldn't be where we are today with 23 of these things. Half a star. I was very dissatisfied with this movie. Wish I didn't waste my money on it. Yeah, you should have torrented it, I think. That's my opinion. 1 star. After 10 years of triumphs and falls by a studio that seemed to know what it was doing, Captain Marvel is a waste of time that brings nothing but confusion to the movie universe that has been built upon. Brie Larson is an okay casting and does deliver a solid performance, but in a movie filled with bad jokes, cheap explanations, and a whole lot of tomfoolery, you can't make a bad movie better by adding an okay actress. Yes, I agree completely. This bland movie, if you had put an awesome actress in the role, if she had nailed that performance, then this movie, everybody would have overlooked all the other flaws with the movie. In fact, it probably would have been a lot better than the first Thor movie, in my opinion. Half a star. Plot holes everywhere. Character was boring, two-dimensional, and never felt a connection with Carol. Writers and director decided to focus more on making a powerful female character rather than to focus on the plot, which they succeeded. Would rather wait for a Black Widow or Scarlet Witch movie. Now someone mentions a Black Widow movie. There is a Black Widow movie coming. Of course, we know Black Widow's dead, so it's going to be a prequel or something that could retcon Black Widow. So the jury's out on that. If it's going to go like Marvel seems to be going, then people might be kind of upset by the Black Widow movie. We're going to have to see on that one. I wouldn't get too excited yet. Half a star. Worst movie of MCU. The protagonist is very forced and without charisma. The only good part of this movie is the performance of Samuel L. Jackson and Ben Mendelsohn. Did I just read that? Maybe I did. Okay. Maybe I read that twice. I apologize. Let's just move to the next page. You see how it can really wear you down going through these. Originally I had planned on sticking with it, like on my last review of The Last Jedi, Rotten Tomatoes reviews. I had planned on, if there were going to be 1,000 of them, I was going to go through it all, maybe even break the video up into different parts. But eventually I started reading the same ones, and they started doubling up. And I don't know what's going on with Rotten Tomatoes, but there's something going on where these reviews are popping up more than once as you scroll from page to page, and with no way to find out the total number of reviews or to go from one page to the next without hitting previous or next. At that point, I'm just going to call it. So if I start seeing repeats, I'm just going to call this thing. No point in wasting extra time. We've wasted plenty, most likely, or at least I have. I'm not going to lie. 1 star. The only reason this movie made big bucks was because of being the prelude to Endgame. Plot was loose and really boring. The writers made no effort to develop a really interesting story for Captain Marvel. They tried to empower women, but they failed, in my opinion. They showed us a badass heroine since the beginning till the end. No character development for Carol, and showing us she being kind of cocky and a show-off due to her ultimate limitless power. Brie Larson performance didn't help at all. Yeah, I agree. Half a star. Yeah, it says bad stuff, but I'm not going to butcher Spanish or Portuguese in trying to read it. 4 stars. Brie Larson is perfect as the female hero and steals the show. The storyline is convoluted, but the visual effects and action-packed sequences make this movie to be lovable by all Marvel diehard fans. Really, I disagree. I'm a Marvel diehard fan, at least MCU diehard fan, and I say you're full of it. Take it for what it's worth. 1 star. The worst Marvel movie to date. The acting of the woman that plays Captain Marvel was just not believable, and some of the lines were downright cringeworthy. If I didn't want to miss the tie-ins to the Avengers movies, I would have turned it off halfway through. 4 stars. Good movie. Don't like Brie Larson, but enjoy the movie. Well, at least you're honest about Brie Larson. Half a star. Half a star and foreign language, but I'll take your word for it. 2 stars, so much potential. Instead, horrible CGI, and the story fails to get your attention. 1/2 star, boring. The plot made no sense, and the effects look like garbage. 2.5 stars. The critics' consensus is good just because of the surroundings about the movie and the innovations of being a female star character. The movie is actually not that good. Well, see, I disagree because there are no innovations about having a female star character. There are no innovations here. There have been female star characters in science fiction and action movies and superhero movies going back throughout my entire life. And that's more than 40 years. So what innovation? What innovation other than you're just like trying to shove politics into this? There's no innovation in that. Did anybody not see, like, for example, the first Alien movie in 1979? Who was the strong main star of that? Oh, it was a woman, that's right. And in the sequel, Aliens 2. And more recently in Wonder Woman. I mean, where's the innovation? This isn't new. This isn't the 1950s here. So 1.5 stars. Just not a good movie at all. 5 stars. Very funny movie, good action sequences, nice story, love the cat, love Brie Roll, love Samuel Jackson parts. Okay, I get it. You love everything. Okay, maybe they just love everything. 1 star. The plot holes were deeper than most of the characters. Very well said. A powerful character does not make a strong character. A character who faces no realistic stakes and whose only limiter was a small pin she could disable at any time? If a competent villain has the ability to restrict those powers, why would he allow her to remove said limiter? Why would he even let her know it was there? The choice of playing just a girl makes it hard to ignore any potential political messages this movie has thrown at the audience. Yeah, it's like it's in your face, isn't it? Strong girl power, and even in the outright song selection, they just throw it in your face. 2 stars, uninteresting, dry, forgettable. 1.5 stars, the movie was boring, and I was disappointed in all the clout they gave her. 0.5 star, this movie is inaccurate, and the Brie Larson can't act to save her life. How the woman got an Oscar, we will never know. Yeah, I've heard that a lot. How did she get an Oscar? Maybe it was politics. Maybe she's their political girl. Maybe it is all politics. It's not the first time somebody said the Oscars were political. Maybe it's all politics. 0.5 star, non-actor, non-good story, everything is poor. 1 star, don't waste your time. 1.5 stars, I have been a big fan of the Marvel movies since Iron Man. I have always looked forward to each new movie when they are released. But Captain Marvel was a good movie that just didn't seem to have any purpose, almost a money grab between Infinity Wars and Endgame. The main difference between this movie and all the others, the main hero has no likable personality at all. I found myself rooting for the villains halfway through the movie. I seriously couldn't care any less for this character or whatever the issue, etc. I agree completely. 4.5 stars. Brie Larson, Samuel L. Jackson, and Ben Mendelsohn are great. Visuals are beautiful and is one of the most creative and fun Marvel origin stories that we have seen in a while. Okay, loyal to the end to Disney. Let's make this our last page because I think everybody sees the pattern here. It is really Brie Larson's performance. The rest of the movie would probably be overlooked without her. So let's make this the last page so we don't get too long-winded. 1 star. It is a cringe spectacle from the horrible miscasting of Miss Larson to the ridiculous action scenes. I am happy I didn't pay for the movie at the theater and waited this long to watch it. Critics have lost their minds if they think this is a good movie. 2 stars. When I went to watch the Captain Marvel movie in the theater, I was convinced I was going to hate it, but I wanted to give it every chance I possibly could and separate my preconceptions from my thoughts while viewing. At the end of the day, one thing to say about the movie, meh. The action and visuals were all right and went, and the comedy halfway funny, but Brie Larson's performance as Captain Marvel was so heartless and monotone that made it impossible to relate with, and the movie suffered. I agree. 5 stars. One of my favorite movies of the last few years. Loved the humor and backstory revelations better than Endgame, which had a slow, drawn-out first half. One of my top 6 superhero movies, along with the first Guardians movie, Wonder Woman, and all 3 Captain America movies. Wow, that's a next level shill there. He wants to, he or she, I'm assuming it's a he because the name is Bruce, he wants to shill the movie, but he thought to actually name drop all the other popular movies too. So, stepping up the shillery a little there, I think so. 2 stars. No substance, Mary Sue superhero, genuinely unlikable. 0.5 star. Keep your identity politics out of comic book movies, not buying what you're selling. 5 stars. Y'all need to stop hating. The movie was good. Get over your testosterones. That's not political at all, is it? Oh no. 5 stars. I love what this movie represents. On the surface, it's a feminist dream, but the deeper core is that Captain Marvel is the strongest because of her humanity. Yes, I bet she is. 3.5 stars. Not the usual origin story, but one that weaves a little more deception and humor into the mix. I would say the deception failed and the humor was non-existent, except for if you wanted to take Nick Fury losing his eye from a cat scratch as humor. It could have been portrayed that way and it would have worked, but it didn't work if that's what they were going for. 1 star. Spanish, but I'll take their word for it. 3.5 stars. Very funny, pacing was done well, and the arc was amazing. Absolutely loved it. Well, we're going to end on that one. I obviously didn't absolutely love it. I would say the negative reviews outnumber the positive ones by quite a ratio. Um, I don't know what to say other than this is number 2 of my Rotten Tomatoes review of reviews, and there will be more. I'm going to find films that just get, as they say on Twitter, ratioed. I'm going to find these disparities. I'm going to try to find out, what I can mine out of seeing the critics say something is just fantastic and the real person sees it and says it's garbage. I think we should look into this. I think that this is entertaining to me. I'm going to continue, and I'll probably figure out what hat choice I'm going to get, because I know my hat choice, the first one, it was a bandana. That wasn't my choice. Somebody made that choice for me. So I'm going to find a style, maybe a style that goes along with Rotten Tomatoes. Who knows? In any case, I'll see you on the next one.